a boy from Delhi, from a wealthy family. His father was an Indian Revenue Service officer. His mom was a lecturer in a famous college in Delhi. And this kid, he grows up as a very bright guy, and he joins Indian Institute of Technology Delhi, IIT Delhi, to pursue electrical engineering degree. He completes the degree and then he joins for the higher course in IIT itself, and he finishes his masters. And then he goes to United States of America to do his doctorate in a very prestigious institution situated in Texas, University of Houston at Texas. So a man with this kind of a pedigree, with this kind of education, what would we expect him to do after he finishes his course? My dear listeners of radioudaan, I am your RJ Babuji, Janak, Rajan. You are listening to the latest episode of the Great Indian Monolog. In this episode, I am going to introduce you to a man of conviction, a man of tremendous stature, who was largely unknown for most of the Indians, except for a very small, a blip kind of an event when he became instantly famous, and then everybody forgot about him. You know, this kid who became a PhD scholar from United States of America, he returns to his alma mater, to his own IIT institution where he did his graduation program, and he joins there as a professor. For a couple of years, he teaches there, and one of his students went on to become a global phenomenon, and his name was, familiar to almost all corners of the world. I would introduce the student a bit later, but this program, this talk show is about the professor. Okay. This is the year 1982. He has been teaching in IIT Delhi for a couple of years, and he's growing impatient with what is happening in life around him, with the quality of life and the disparity in India and many other factors. They keep gnawing at him. And one fine day, he quits his job, a plush job, 1980s IIT professor. It's a real big deal. And he quits everything, and he simply disappears into the hinterlands of India. From Delhi, he moves on to Madhya Pradesh, into a very remote tribal village in the Betul region, where hardly 750 tribal people lived at that point in time, and that village didn't have an access road and it didn't have electricity. And the pity is, even today, the situation stays the same in that village. So he goes there, and he's an outsider, but he slowly starts mingling with the local people, the tribals, and he learns the languages and the dialects, and he settles down there. And for the next so many years, he has been actively engaged in promoting tribal upliftment, tribal life upliftment. For about 26 years, nobody knew him or his work except the people who were associated with him in the tribal village, and an association which was working for the cause of the tribal people. What he was doing, nobody knew till 2016. 2016 is a significant year, I will tell you why. And before that, he was an unknown Indian who disappeared into the hinterlands, doing things which nobody really cared for. He was basically planting trees and distributing seeds. And as his possession, he had a bicycle, 3 pairs of kurtas, nothing more, nothing less. And every day he used to travel around 60-70 kilometers on his bicycle, distributing seeds to anybody and everybody he sees on his way, encouraging them to plant trees. Even this information came to light in 2016 when the election officials, an election was announced in Betul region in Madhya Pradesh, and election officials, they reached the village to conduct the elections, and they spotted him, a non-tribal guy living there in the tribal hamlet with bare facilities, which makes the place hardly livable. They grow suspicious of him, what he is doing here, and he looks a bit strange, with almost like a fakir. So they take him to the police station to question him, about his whereabouts and his origins and so on. And after much prodding by the police officials, he reluctantly shares the information that he is a post graduate from IIT Delhi and a doctorate from United States, and he was a professor in Delhi, and he had been working with the tribals for the past 26 years. They didn't believe him at first, so he had to produce his certificates to prove who he was as he told them. Then their disbelief turned into exclamation. They were surprised that such a guy could do such a thing, having come from Delhi with that kind of a pedigree, with that kind of a family background and education history. What the heck is he doing in this village? This news came out in a few newspapers. Then every big media house in India picked it up, and there were audio stories, video stories, and pictorials about him all over the country. He became an instant sensation, more so when they learnt that one of his students was none other than the ex-economic minister of India, Mr. Rajan, a colossal figure in the world economics, right? So everybody gloated about him that, such a tireless and altruistic Indian, a selfless Indian who was working for the upliftment of the tribes. The government, picked up the news, and in 2017, he was nominated for a Padma Award. But he refused the award, and then the media attention on him waned, and nobody really cared what he was doing and why he was doing, to whom he was doing. And as of today, if you search through Google, you would hit upon many articles, which more or less repeat the same kind of story with a lot of factual errors. That, this is a man from Delhi with IIT education and US doctorate and the professorship, and then he quit everything and he went to the tribal hamlet and he has been planting 50,000 plus trees. But beyond this, no information was available about his actual work and what motivated him and why he was planting trees and what kind of trees and where. But uniformly, there were some reporting errors, like, he is adept in, 7 to 8 languages. And in one of the media reports I read, it stated that he speaks 78 languages, not 78. This is how news gets, twisted, unintentionally or intentionally. And in the last, 5 to 6 years, nobody really bothered about his whereabouts and what he was doing and so on. But I became a bit curious because, I was just wondering, planting 50,000 trees is not a big deal if a government institution or an NGO steps in. It could do it overnight. It can procure the saplings and it can do it. But why this guy has been doing it over such a long period, 26 plus another 6 years now, 32 years. And what kind of trees would have been planting and why in the tribal belt? How was he accepted by the tribal people? I dug a bit deeper, and what I learned is a phenomenal story worth of a blockbuster movie, but nobody in India would really care to know more about that. Okay. Before I reveal what he has been doing and what kind of trees he has been planting, I would take you on a historic course. We go back to 1850s. When the East Indian Trading Company, pitched its tents in India and slowly spread its wings and started gobbling up all our forest resources, they had a problem. The tribal people who were living in the forest, they refused to budge and they started agitating. Birsa Munda was a classic example, and Birsa Munda, the father of earth, you would have heard his story. And he actually started the first freedom struggle of India, the known freedom struggle of India from the north. The dates and the places could be disputed, but he was one of the earliest persons to revolt against the British atrocities, and it came from the hinterlands of Bihar and Jharkhand, I believe. I'm not sure about the exact location. I think it is Jharkhand, yeah. And the tribal people in the forest, they were living there from time immemorial. When the British guys came in, they saw the beautiful hundreds of years old trees in the forest, and they thought they would make fine timber for their palaces and churches and other government buildings all over the Europe. So they started cutting down the trees, systematically. But the biggest issue was the tribal people were resisting the British occupation of the forest, and the British forces, they couldn't uproot the tribal people or chase them away from the forest because seemingly the tribal people, they were not engaged in any kind of work as modern world knows, but they were healthy and happy. The secret was the fruit trees in the forest and the fruit plants, basically all kind of plants which are edible, particularly fruits. They helped the entire tribal groups feed and live a healthy life, because the food was the main concern, right? And if it is taken care, they pursue other things like protecting nature and working with nature, interacting with nature, or whatever. So the Britishers, they devised a way to chase them out from the forest, and they started cutting down all the fruit trees in the forest along with the timber trees. Slowly the tribals were forced out, and they came out of the forest. They didn't know what to do in a modern world, which was enslaved by British rule, the so-called modern India back in 1860s. They had no clue how to survive in that kind of an ambient, because all they knew till then was only forest and more forest, right? Only nature. So they actually resorted to robbery. The produce which was moving through the forest, the British produce, particularly tea, which was planted in the forest lands. When the tea was harvested and transported, it had to go through some forest stretches, and these tribal people, for food, they started robbing these convoys, and sooner or later, the Criminal Tribal Act of India was enacted, Criminal Tribes Act. That's a long story on its own. In 1860s, I believe, some tribes were identified as born criminals, and even a child born in that tribe is identified as a criminal too. So they were hunted from place to place, and in the lands, where they were forcibly moved in, they became slaves for landlords, feudal system, and business people, and they were exploited like anything. This made them really poor, and their situation hadn't improved in the last 250 years, even after 70 years of independence. Many tribal hamlets have malnutrition children who don't have access to quality food, and many children lost their vision, their sight, because of malnutrition. Why malnutrition? In forests, our own government enacted a rule prohibiting planting of any kind of orchard trees. One cannot plant fruit trees in Indian forests. This is the case as of 2016-2017, against which a lot of tribal communities and associations have filed cases in Indian courts, and some cases are still pending, right? So this was the situation. These people, these tribal people, their life was dependent on the fruit trees of the forest, and when they were deprived of that, they had a big issue. This IIT professor, he took it upon himself to plant fruit trees in the tribal belts of Madhya Pradesh, in the poorest of the poor stretches. Betul is one such area where even today road access, electricity is not there in many tribal hamlets. And patiently and painstakingly for the past 26 years, Dr. Alok Sagar, that's the name of this great man, he had been planting fruit trees and distributing fruit seeds with a singular focus of eradicating hunger and malnutrition among the original landholders of our great forests. None of the media outlets, none of the newspapers, none of the TV channels who gave front page coverage and prime time coverage of Dr. Alok Sagar when the election commission case was, when the inquiry was revealed, they were able to cover this because they were simply not interested, because they were after sensationalism, and a man living like a fakir who was the professor of Rajan was itself a great material for them to get more viewership. So they made it, and then they moved on, forgetting what he was doing and what he is still doing. This man is about 71 years old today, and even today his routine is the same. He has been distributing fruit seeds and saplings everywhere in tribal belts. And a lot of tribal people, they have benefited because of this. If a tribal man, if he grows a few fruit trees in his neighborhood, his food is taken care. not just for one season, but season after season, because the trees are perennial, annual and perennial. And one of the tribal associations he is associated with, he is working closely with, they actually told in a media briefing that if you plant fruit trees in just 1 acre within forest, you can feed so many people with so many so much food, which cannot even be grown in large farms in the commercial farming way, because the commercial farming focuses only on monocrop. And even the forest department, they have been promoting only monocrops like timber trees, Melia dubia and eucalyptus and so on as economic incentives. These trees, they add some economic value, but they don't see the value in food, which is a primary health giver for millions of tribal people living in our forests or the displaced areas. So the tribal people, the Gond tribes and a few other tribes from Madhya Pradesh who are displaced from their own native forests, who are living in remote areas, they are immensely benefited by the fruit trees and the saplings and the seeds distributed by Dr. Alok Sagar. And 50,000, it must be a small count. He must have done much more than that. To give you a parallel of what kind of an impact giving few fruit saplings to a tribal man or a woman helps. It has been done successfully in my state, in South India, in Tamil Nadu, in a place called Sitlingi Valley, which is located in the high plains of Dharmaburi district, where a doctor pair from Kerala, Reggie, George and Lalita, they have set up a primary health center some 25-30 years back. Their journey was also somewhat similar. They were doctor couple. They actually wanted to work in a rural area for some time to gain experience. So they chose Sitlingi Valley and they went there for conducting a primary health camp for some time. When the doctor couple, they moved around treating people, they realized that most of the patients were malnutrition, and malnutrition was the biggest issue there. And if they could crack that, then the tribal people, they wouldn't have had any other health issue, because most of them were healthy and hardworking. So the doctor couple, they started propagating the idea of millet cultivation in the tribal hamlet, and they also started distributing fruit trees, like 3 to 4 mango trees per hut. After some time, the millet started yielding right from year 1, and the fruit trees started yielding after a while. And the doctor couple, they started carrying the millet produce in their doctor kit, when they used to travel for, conferences in faraway places like Chennai, Bangalore and all, marketing their produce, which had a social cause behind that. And Sitlingi Valley had proved that, if you eradicate malnutrition with the help of fruit trees, gifted fruit trees to tribal people, their life quality improves and they could pursue other stuff. And Sitlingi had become a model village with a fully functional world-class hospital facility, and a lot of tribal people who are living there, they are living happy, healthy and prosperous too. And Alok Sagar, he has been doing it on a much larger scale, and whatever attention the Sitlingi Valley got, that itself is meager, but this man, he hadn't even got that. And still he keeps doing his work, and he rightly refused to accept the Padma Award because it was given only because of the sentiment wave which was engulfing the media around 2016, just because he was discovered in Betul region by the Election Commission as a non-native guy. Hats off to Alok Sagar and people like him. I know a few, who are away from the limelight, who intentionally avoid limelight because it interferes in their regular work, who do phenomenal work with people who really need it most. The unsung heroes of India, they are not just in the war fronts of India or in the decision-making chambers of our country. They are toiling in the field silently, away from the media glare, day in and day out, without expecting any kind of reward or recognition, because they knew this beautiful saying, which was quoted on Rabindranath Tagore. the person who plants a seed knowing fully well that he would not live to eat the fruits of the tree has begun to understand the meaning of life. These guys, these guys and women, the guys is a general term I use. It includes both sexes, men and women, who do this kind of a phenomenal grassroots level work. They know that tribal people are the most connected ones with nature, and food was never meant to be slogged for or never meant to be, aspired for after putting in hard working hours. If you work for 8 hours, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and 26 days a month and 12 months a year, only then your regular salary would be ensured and you can have access to food. That is the pitiable situation all the human beings in our world live today. But it was not the case earlier. Some thousands of years back, nobody had to work for food because food was available free. It was produced by nature and consumed by people. Now, food is produced by industries and we pay through our nose to buy the food to keep ourselves healthy, but we are becoming sicker as the day goes by, and we are paying more and more on our medical bills and hospitalization cash, just to stay alive and healthy. But this man, he knows the holy grail of healthy living, that food must be free and it must be planned in a good way, that, and forests are the rock bed of, food generation. And he had been doing this tirelessly for 30 plus years, and even today he must be planting some trees somewhere and distributing some seed to some hungry hands. And I'm sure the people who are working with him, the associations, the tribal associations and the tribal people who are directly connected with him, they will cherish him almost like God. Why almost like? As God. If this is not a godly act, what else could be a godly act? Religion comes much, much later, right? If you are able to feed the hunger of the people around you, what more you could expect as a superpower? My dear listeners of Radio Udaan, I became emotionally charged, while speaking to you about this particular man, because I see the value, I feel the value in what he is doing, regardless of what the world thinks about him or not, by ignoring him. He is doing the right thing, the only thing, which is right in my eyes to solve the hunger problem of the world. This will surely help manage our food and even help the people who are dying because of malnutrition, not just in India, but all over the world. If you take the statistics, 1/10 of the population, they produce the food for 9/10 of the people, and still millions of people, they go to bed tonight with empty stomach. And many children, they go to sleep today, if they are able to sleep with a hungry stomach, they may not get up tomorrow because they are so malnutrition, they are so starved for food, their life is in danger. But still, the countries all over the world are stockpiling food grains, with a potential scenario where in case if a calamity breaks out, if a war breaks out, or if a drought sets in, or if a famine breaks out, or if a disease breaks out, we, the wealthy nations, can feed our population. This is the scenario we live in, and some people are real change makers, who have taken up the change upon themselves. And Dr. Alok Shagar is a living example, and a huge, salute and truckloads of respect for this man. May his tribe long live and multiply. My dear listeners of Radio Udaan, I'm your RJ Babuji Janak Rajan. You just listened to yet another episode of the Great Indian Monolog. I hope this story motivates you in some level to do something for the people around us who are really suffering, even for having one full meal in a day. My dear listeners, I'll talk to you again in yet another episode of the Great Indian Monolog in a week's time. Till then, I wish you a great time. Stay blessed. See you. Bye-bye.